As a lot of you guys know, I have been finding myself getting deeper and deeper into comic books, and I have not found a lot of videos online telling people where to start or how to start getting into comic books. So I'm going to start by making a video about how to get into comic books because I'm sure there's a lot of people that would like to read some comic books, but they just are not into it for whatever reasons, or they're like I was. And you see DC and Marvel, and you see how big and expansive those universes are, and how much you need to learn, and you just never grew up doing it, reading about those. You never grew up in that world. It seems like I need to know 60 years of history just to understand what's going on in the movies, or I need to watch these movies that I don't want to watch just to understand what's going on in this movie that I do want to watch, or so forth and whatever. And I just, was a little overwhelmed with comic books in general and comic book movies, that it just kind of turned me off for a lot of years because I didn't know what was going on. I was never grew up in it, never was drawn to a Batman or Superman. Like, my biggest thing with Superman was, he was, always perfect, like, Man of Steel, all this stuff. He's just the perfect superhero doing all the perfect stuff. That's not real life. That seems so far from real life. I never liked Batman. He was just a rich guy that could afford gadgets and stuff, and could do crazy things to fight crime. Who cares? Don't care about some rich dude. It's just not who I am. Uh, Spider-Man was the one that I kind of was interested in as a kid, but you know, as I became not a teenager, he became less of a character that I was into. Same with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like, as a kid, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were cool. As I grew up, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were no longer cool. I found something else to occupy myself. I was always into sports or something else that wasn't comic books. So I just was really removed from the world of comic books, and I wanted to get into it or give it a try because it has been something that was interesting to me. I just didn't know really where to start, and you only ever hear about Marvel and DC. You don't hear really too much about all the other options that are out there. There are a lot of great comic books. I would recommend it to anybody if you are even potentially thinking you're interested in comic books to do it. I'm going to start first with things that I would not recommend doing. First and foremost, I would not recommend buying comics online. I did that as soon as I found some comics that I started liking. I started purchasing the physical omnibuses and comporiums online, and I still have not received it. It's been almost 2 to 3 weeks, and I understand Thanksgiving has been over there and Christmas is coming now, but it's just kind of crazy to order something online and not get it in a reasonable time. I don't even think it's been shipped yet. And if it's not here by this Friday, or at least not shipped, I might reach out to the company and just try to cancel the order. I don't know how it works, but I would not recommend buying comic books online. Uh, and then the other thing I would not recommend is trying to keep up with trends, or feeling like you need to know what's going on in like the mainstream comic books. You do not need to know anything about anything you're not interested in. And that's been like my biggest takeaway from this is I don't need to know what's going on in the Superman world. I don't need to know what's going on in the Batman world. I don't need to know anything that's going on that in these big name Marvels and DC platforms that I really have not been drawn to for most of my life. I can kind of start and pick and choose where I want to start. So those are the things I would not recommend. Now, for the things that I would recommend. If you are getting into comics, I would highly, highly recommend using AI to help you with your first couple of recommendations. So I did this. I was like, hey, I want to get into comics. It asked me a couple questions. I provided some things that I thought would be useful. Like, hey, here are some movies that I really enjoyed watching. I'm not a big movie watcher, but these are the ones that I personally know I like. These are the genres that I enjoy. These are the genres that I hate. I don't want anything horror. I'm not into the horror Walking Dead type of stuff. Don't recommend me those type of things. Um, I don't necessarily need the message to be deep. I don't need it to be anything crazy, but I do want there to be something more than just a superhero goes off, fights a battle, comes back, and that's it, moves on to the next villain, yada, yada, yada. I want there to be a little substance to it. Books that I've really enjoyed, I put those in. Some art styles that I enjoy. and some main characters from some series or movie series or trilogies that I've just, over the years felt like I connected with. So I put all that stuff into AI. It recommended me about, 6 or 7 titles. I looked into them. Some of the art styles did not jive with me. I'm going to call out one specific one because it just sticks in my head. It recommended Bone. I'm sure Bone is a great comic book, and I probably would have enjoyed reading it. But when I looked at the comic, it just looked too childish. It reminded me of like Snoopy or like something like that. That just felt like something I didn't want to get into, or at least not start with. Maybe I could get into it down the road. I don't know. But as of right now, I'm not really interested in the comic book Bone. But it was good to go check each one, look at what the character looked like. Is this something that I'd be interested in? Read a little summary of what the story's about, and go from there. I just thought that using AI to help me whittle down to about 6, 7 series or to start reading was super useful. The other thing that was super useful to know when I got into comic books was when I initially thought about it, I was like, dang, I'm going to have to buy a lot of comic books to keep up with these stories. I only knew about the single issues. That's like the typical comic book, it's the typical comic book size, about somewhere between 6 to 13 pages, and you just have to buy those to keep up with the story. I knew nothing about collections. I knew nothing about comporiums or omnibuses. And if you are getting into this genre of entertainment, you need to know what comporiums and omnibuses are. They are basically a collection of one complete story. For the most part, it's from issue whatever to issue whatever of the story. Most of them have been about somewhere in the range of like 1,000 pages, and they're a much more affordable way to get into it. Instead of buying each issue for like $4, you're buying each issue, all the issues combined for about anywhere from like $20 to $60, somewhere in that range. There are a couple that are more expensive, but that just gives you a kind of idea of how much it would cost you to get into them. So I would highly recommend understanding what comporiums and omnibuses are. And if you are looking to get into a specific character or a specific series, I would recommend starting with one of those things, and you can always branch out after that and read whatever side stories or side characters that you're interested in from there. I would also highly recommend getting into digital comic books. One thing I was afraid of was, like I said, I thought I had to collect each one of the individual issues. And whenever I was watching these videos of people that were super into comic books, everything that was always behind them was these stacks and stacks of boxes where they collected all of these issues over the years, and they just had so much space dedicated to the collection that they were creating. And there's a lot of people in the genre that collect full runs of everything. You don't have to be like everybody else. I would highly discourage that. I would recommend going digital initially, especially if you don't know where you're starting, you don't know what you're starting with. I have started with a company called an app called GlobalComix. It was super easy to use. You're able to download it on your phone. It's a little app. Let me pull it up here. So I have a couple apps here on my phone. It's this one right in the middle with the orange little C. GlobalComix comes up like this. You can purchase your comic books right here on your phone, and you can read them off of your phone as well, and they show up pretty well. Once you start reading them digitally like this, the next thing I would highly, highly recommend, and it just changed everything the moment I did it. If you have an iPad or if you have a tablet already, you don't have to buy anything. You could use that. The tablets I all have, my kids use, so I needed to, buy something that was more specific for just me. So I bought this Amazon Fire 10 or something like that. It was like $120 for comic books. And the way I justified it was that this is going to be able to, I'm going to be able to download all the comics that I want to on here. I can take it with me if I need to, if I want to read it. I can take it anywhere where I want to read. I don't have the ability to damage a physical copy of a comic book that might be worth something. And I just think it's super easy to get into comics when you have something like this, and you get to see them in your real life setting. So here's one that I just read. All right, so continue reading this omnibus. As you can see, I already read this, so it's starting back over. But you have everything right here at your fingertips. Here we go. Everything right here at your fingertips. You got good colors. Looks like very good. This is Black Hammer. I just finished the first omnibus of this. And I'm probably going to read the second one. The first one was good. I wish it got more in depth in some of the stories. Like, you start with all of the characters and you break down each of their backstories, how they ended up on this farm. It's very interesting. There's a good storyline, good plot, but I wish it did go deeper. So I'm going to probably read the second one as well. But I would highly recommend getting a cheap tablet, or if you have a cheap tablet, using that to read comic books on, because it just makes the whole reading experience way better, smoother, not worrying about messing up paper or, physically bending corners or somebody spilling something on the book, anything like that. And then the last thing that I would recommend for anybody getting into comic books for the first time is go walk into a comic book shop. Maybe it's just me, maybe it's my anxiety, but I did have a little bit of fear walking into a comic book shop. Like, all these people know everything about comics and I know absolutely nothing. But I went in there, talked to the guy behind the counter. He was super, happy that we showed up to the comic book store. I brought my daughter with me. She wants to get into manga or whatever the hell it is. Mangoes, I don't care. She's trying to get into that stuff, so she was able to pick out a book. I was able to look at the physical copies of the books I was reading, and I just really enjoyed talking to the people behind the counter, getting their recommendations based on what AI recommended. And some of them had like, hey, this story might look this way, but once you get into it, you might find that it's a lot more in depth. It might align a lot better than what you're just seeing at the surface. So I think having that kind of interaction was really helpful for me as well. And I think a lot of new people shouldn't be so afraid to just go into their local comic book shop and ask somebody behind the counter what they recommend, where they should start. They're going to point you in the direction of omnibuses, comporiums, and they're going to get you set up going down the right path. You can tell them what your budget is. You can tell them, comic books that you like or comic books that you don't like. Things you can talk to them. They're pretty personable, at least the people that I have met at comic book shops. I've only gone to 2 and I've had great experiences in both. Like I said at the beginning, this is brand new for me. These are just my recommendations and things that I would try to avoid if I was getting into it all over again. And I hope this video was useful to anybody out there who finds themselves in the same boat. With that being said, as always, I love you guys so much, and until the next one, peace.
Comic Book Corner, turn the page, explore. Heroes rise, the villains scheme, the hero falls, the city screams.